All righty. Before we get started, I just want to reiterate my sincere apology for the comment I made a couple of Fridays ago. You missed the mark, and we are committed to being better for you and keeping this show the light, sports-focused place it's meant to be. So let's get back to doing what we are here to do, speculating and handling the sports issues at hand. All righty now. Good morning, and welcome to 9 to noon. A cavalcade of guests will be joining us today to discuss the big sports news that emerged a few days ago, and it involves these guys.
You spent a lot of those nights, obviously, you're up in these decisions, and they're uncertain, and you're trying to make sure that you don't lock yourselves into what you did and thinking that it's always right. And so there's those nights and you wake up and stare at the ceiling and ask yourself.
Ultimately, we felt the change was necessary in football operations and did not feel comfortable going forward into this offseason with the current leadership.
I don't want to say overconfidence, but I do think him being here was something that we kind of considered and thought would impact his decision. But ultimately, there are free agents, and to your point, learning lessons, I think, and ultimately we could have executed better around that.
It's not about any one decision or move. We looked at the situation cumulatively. We just didn't feel confident going through the entirety of the offseason, an additional draft, and free agency with this structure.
Obviously the season just ended, so we're focusing on obviously the people that we have in the building first, and how JJ how he's matured and how he's gone on through the season. You talk about his first 6 games and how they went, but the last 4 games, great increases in completion percentage, touchdown, interception, 4 wins, obviously, and different things like that.
We have an urgency to create a winning football team and establish sustainable success for our fans. At the same time, we balance that urgency with all decisions thoroughly and methodically. Winning football, that's what drives all our decision-making, and it is the core of all our efforts every single day.
I always go back to the process and what we thought at the time. It's easier to kind of go and be revisionist and results-based, but going to really think through what we had at the time. I still understand why we did what we did.
Rob Brzezinski will lead our football operations in the interim through the draft, and will rely heavily on Kevin, the coaching staff, the talent evaluators we have on this personnel side. We have an excellent, strong organization. Rob brings tremendous credibility and experience, understands our roster, and has an innate ability to build consensus with coaches and personnel.
The voices of Minnesota Vikings president Mark Wilf and former general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. And welcome. Joining us now is Pete Bercich, a longtime Minnesota Vikings linebacker, half-decade coach, and heading into his 20th season as in-booth analyst for the KFAN Minnesota Vikings audio network. And Peter, very, very good to know you're alive. And I know you feel the same about me. And good morning.
Yes, it's good to be amongst the living, Paul.
Let's get to the big sports news circulating these days, Pete. The Minnesota Vikings moved on from general manager Kwesi Adofo-Mensah after 4 full seasons of service, and of course wished him well. The acting general manager through the draft, as we just heard, will be the amiable and experienced Rob Brzezinski, who has served the Minnesota Vikings for 27 years. And mostly as the executive vice president of football operations. Pete, let's get to the what's next first, Kwesi second. Brzezinski, fantastic choice for the now, don't you think?
Yeah, Rob, here's the thing. Rob has been in draft rooms and been part of this for over 20 years. When I was coaching back in the day and having been through the drafts and a number of drafts together, it was Rob Brzezinski, Scott Studwell, and Mike Tice, and that was the group that was put together, and that's how we did draft meetings. And so my point being that Rob has been in that room for a long time. He's seen a lot of these drafts. He's listened to scouting reports now for 20 some years about these players. And so it's not going to be anything new for him. I know he's going to, he has his own style, and he's going to put his own, mark on how things are going, how things are presented, all the all the million and one little details as to how this whole ship is going to operate. But they, when I heard it was going to be Rob that's going to be running the draft, it's like, okay, that's just, he's done this before. It's not going to be anything new or novel to the whole thing. So yeah, the Vikings are in very good hands, very capable hands, and Rob is going to find a way to get all these guys together and on the same page. And that's, I think, the most important thing over the next few months is a lot of critical decisions will be made for the organization. And I know Rob will have everybody together and on the same page, no matter what those decisions are.
The Analyst.
Well, then you have Ryan Grigson, who will be 54 years of age in less than a month. He's the assistant general manager, and old Ryan has some really good opinions and experience of wins and losses. He's been around the block, hasn't he, Pete?
Yes, he has. And it's when you look at GMs across the league, and he has that personnel background. He's been a GM before, so that's the funny thing about with GMs is once they get fired, how often do they get rehired? You know what I mean? And you learn, that's how you learn. You learn from doing the job. You learn from being out there making the tough decisions. That as a GM is so much different than a head coach in that regard, because the GM position is not the same across the league. A head coach in the NFL is pretty much a head coach in the NFL. It's not going to change a whole lot. If you're in Detroit, if you're in Chicago, if you're in Tampa Bay, but when you're a GM, the ownership really dictates and changes, what your role is and how much you do. Being GM in Dallas is a little bit different than being GM in Minnesota. So having a guy with that kind of experience and background, especially, his side of his special, he was an old lineman, right? He was an offensive lineman, so he knows that position very well. But he is the classic scout, meaning this, Paul, you give him any town, any small town, Appalachian State, you ask him where the best restaurants are, he'll know where they are. That's a true scout. True scouts know where all the good food is all across this country.
Pete Bercich, in-booth analyst for the Minnesota Vikings audio network. With Brzezinski, I wonder if he gets the draft. And like if he's one and done with drafting, do we get to tie like the picks to his name? Look at it this way. So say down the road somebody's like, back in 2026, things changed quickly and Rob Brzezinski was the GM late January through the draft. They went 8 for 8 on their picks. The 18th overall became a Hall of Fame defensive tackle, and the rest fortified the team for years. And led by Kevin O'Connell and his staff's coaching, won 3 consecutive Super Bowls. I wonder if Brzezinski and his name get tied to the draft.
Well, then you should tie it to Kevin Williams if Kevin Williams makes it into the Hall of Fame, because he was around with Kevin Williams when he was drafted. Yeah, I mean, you're going to do that. And Paul, I think the main point, and we as fans and as outsiders are not going to know this, but you have to have somebody to make the call. I mean, collaboration is important. Collaboration means that every voice that's in there that should contribute does contribute. But alongside of collaboration, you still have to have somebody who's going to make a decision. Somebody has to hold that responsibility. There has to be one person with that, and that's usually the general manager. How that's going to work out, we don't know, and we'll never know. So I'm saying this regardless of how the draft goes in 10 years and 20 years from now, when you look back on it. We don't know who's the ultimate person that was pulling for said player and then who ultimately made that decision. Because I don't think, those workings are not public and they shouldn't be public. But yeah, he's overseeing it. So yeah, his name and his stamp is going to be on it regardless of how this next draft goes. That's just part of the bit.
Well, and we've known Rob for quite some time, and we trust Rob, and we know where Rob's heart is, and we know he's going to work really hard for the betterment of this team. He was described this weekend to me by somebody who absolutely would know as a connector. Like, he's not your grind film, win all the draft spot conversations, but he just think about this. He's universally liked and respected by every single person at Twin Cities Orthopedics Performance Center. Man, that's a tough nut to crack any place, any time, right?
Yeah, in an organization like that. And that's the thing when you hear the word, conflict and, people not getting along and all, and I kind of chuckle at that stuff because that's life. That's how it is. People are going to have different opinions. And when you're coaching in the NFL, Paul, or whatever you are in the NFL, your job depends upon everybody doing their job. When you're a player, it's a little bit different. If you're out there making plays happen, if you're an offensive lineman and you're playing very, very well, but the team itself, the offense itself, the group, the offensive line as a group is not playing well, you as a player know you are going to keep your job because you're the best of the bunch and you've been taking care of business. You're not getting offensively, you may not be, accomplishing all of your big goals. But when you're coaching, you're dependent upon everybody else in that room, meaning you might be a linebacker coach and the defense is killing it, but there's a section of the offense isn't doing well, and we're losing games because of this phase of the game or something else. You don't just fire half the staff. Everybody gets fired, right? So coaches depend on the entire group. It's not as if it's just one guy here and one guy there. It's different than a player. And you know that. And so guys have a tendency, like, they'll get out of their lane. They'll comment on things that doesn't fall under their umbrella. Because unfortunately, in the reality of it all is that, you're affected by all of that. My point in saying all of this, Paul, is at that level, you have a lot of people with a lot of big opinions, and they're all going to differ on everything, on everybody, everyone in the draft, how this team should look. Who do you bring in free agency? There has to be some overarching body that can put everybody in line and keep them marching in the same direction. Rob Brzezinski has that. He's been around. He has the gravitas to do that, and he has the technique and the ability to do that. So I'm kind of excited to see what he's going to do and how he's going to arrange all of this and with the scouts and what their input's going to be, how much the coach's input's going to matter, how much this guy's input. He's got to organize and put that team together so you come out of this thing on the same page and everybody's kind of going in the same direction. And that's the big thing is you mentioned the word respect, because you don't have to like every decision that's made, right? If you're a cog in the wheel, if you're a position coach, you don't have to like all of the decisions that the team makes, but you have to respect them. And if you respect them, then you can find a way to move on and move forward. And that's the big thing is Rob has the respect, I think, of everybody in that room.
Hey, we're going to bring Nacho in here in a few minutes and mix it up with us three. So we'll call you right back, okay?
Yeah, U.S. Bank sideline update. What up?
Yep, here it comes, sponsored by U.S. Bank. All right, that's Pete Bercich, in-booth analyst for the vast and ever-expanding KFAN Minnesota Vikings audio network. Nordo,
what up?
Love you.
Love you.
Now, courtesy of TimberTech, TimberTech.com. What's on deck 9 to noon today includes Nacho Leber around the corner, followed by Kyle Rudolph, followed by Wes Walls on the Scorching Wild, followed by Nordo, followed by Adam Kaplan, big-time NFL newsbreaker, followed by Nordo, followed by Parker Fox in studio, followed by Nordo, and we welcome you to FM 100.3, KFAN. I'm Paul Allen. Here comes Nordo. He's got some good news.
Yeah, the fan wants to give you a shot to win some bonus bucks with the National Cash Contest. Just enter the keyword bank at KFAN.com. You might win some money with the keyword bank. Enter that keyword in KFAN.com now.
And joining us now, Ben Leber, Pete Bercich returns, and good to have these brothers in broadcasting with us at 9:20. Good morning. It's clear now. Pete and I chatted about Rob Brzezinski for about 10 minutes. We're going to do the same thing here because I know you know him well, and I know you respect him a lot. Regarding Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the timing of this for sure is peculiar. I never knew of Kevin and Kwesi not respecting each other, but then again, I can't say I ever went looking for it. Like, you know what I mean?
Right. That's first of all, I just want to say it's great to see you. Love you to death, it's good to be back in here with you. I think fair, unfair. I want to sort of sympathize and have some compassion for Kwesi in a situation, but keeping everything professional, this is the nature of our business. And I'm sure that he understands that some of these things are going to come to light when he was let go. I'm hearing more and more about the disagreements between Kwesi and a lot of people within the organization, just about how he conducted his operations of scouting and decision making and time put into the facility and all this other stuff. And it just, as Mark Wilf was saying, it wasn't about one thing in particular. It was about the totality of everything, the holistic view of how the health of the organization and where they're going. And it does make a lot of sense. Now, I don't know. I've heard the same things about what you're talking about. You're referencing with KOC. I don't know all that stuff. All I know is I think that between the paternity leave, the sort of what became sort of a daily routine for him work-wise, his philosophies on scouting people, the maybe not doing the best job of having sort of an open door policy and building the culture from within in his own eyes. I think that all of that's in play, and it wasn't up to the standard.
Pete, then Ben. I mean, it's none of us are. I think we all realize it's not fair. When somebody is hired or somebody loses a job, to let's start with Lewis Seen and let's go through the last person who was drafted with Kwesi leading this regime, and then every single free agent, and then be good, bad, how bad, how good. It's a totality thing that really the timing is so peculiar that clearly it supersedes what picks were and free agents and things like that. So I think you guys would agree with that. I thought Javon Hargrave would be better. And as last season went with a key position, I thought he would be better. I just kind of wonder what happened there. What do you think, Pete?
I would agree with you. I mean, I thought Javon Hargrave in the first four, it was about the first 4 games that he put in with the 49ers a year ago. We watched him on film. He did some amazing things. You watch Javon Hargrave this year, different scheme, completely different scheme. Ben would know a lot about this too, but still kept that real long, wide open stance. He didn't change. I don't know if he was just resistant to changing his fundamentals or whatever it was, but no, he did not make the impact that I had expected. Going back and watching a lot of the film from last year, as that's what you do when the off season starts. Jonathan Allen played and did a lot of things. He by the end of the season, he was playing very, very well. So the Javon Hargrave thing is a bit of a mystery to me. But in totality, you look at the free agents that had been brought in over the last couple of seasons, and I think they've all played pretty darn well. I mean, again, go back and remember 2 seasons ago, this defense faced more passing attempts than any other defense in the league. So you wanted to get that interior pass rush going because you didn't want to have to blitz all of the time. So you go out, you bring in Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, and then you face in 2025 more rushing attempts than any other team in the league. So we go from the most passing attempts to seeing the most rushing attempts. A complete a complete 180. And I guess that's kind of the lesson to be learned, so to speak, is you just don't know. You can't assume that last year is going to be this year. So don't knee jerk and get a bunch of run stuffers up front and then lose some of your pass rushing. But yeah, of all the group and all the people that we brought in, Lord knows 2 years ago, when you brought in Jonathan Grenard and Van Ginkel and Cashman, I mean, that was a great haul defensively, free agent wise. I think, again, Jonathan Allen played very, very well. I think Javon, that's what coaches and GMs and front office people need to know. They need to know what's going on, what happened, and what do we think Javon's going to be able to improve going into the next year.
And I think it's important for people to know that you have a general manager, and it's that name is going to be tied with draft and or free agency related wins and losses, even though most, if not all, head coaches have big says in things. You have assistant general managers, you have scouts, you have coordinators. So it's a hodgepodge of decision making when it goes into, draft picks that don't work and or free agents that do work. Like for instance, the most recent regime nailed Isaiah Rodgers, Eric Wilson, Jordan Mason, Will Fries, and Fabian Moreau. And when you're the GM, as I mentioned, your name is the first associated, even with the likes of Louis Sean, Brian Asamoah, Grenard and Van Ginkel, and Jordan Mason. Many other opinions and factors lead to the final answer for sure, but the GM's name always is the first one mentioned, right?
Well, it has to be, because that's just the way organizational and corporate structures are. Is every decision made by the CEO of any company? No, not necessarily. But does the buck have to stop someplace, and do people have to take responsibility for certain things that happen? 100%. And I think part of that is just the culture of what you build, which again is, I think, going back to the totality thing, like it was a wrong cultural fit that Kwesi was trying to implement. And then you throw in the fact that, in all fairness, like you're saying, some of the free agents were absolute home runs, but he was asked to come in and rebuild this roster and get us in a position where we could spend more money versus having to be penny pinchers. And here we are now. I don't think we have to make a lot of tough choices this offseason with their salary cap, but we don't have a lot of playing room. So even when we make some of the necessary cuts contract-wise that I think are kind of the obvious cuts, we still are not left with a lot of money, even though the salary cap is going to go up $25+ million this year. That's going to be across the board for everybody. So percentage-wise, we still are not going to have a lot of spending money. He didn't help out in that regard because his draft picks were such busts. And the way that you build these teams into championship teams is you build through the draft, and you should have some money in the offseason to get a few pieces here and there. That doesn't mean that you rebuild the whole roster through free agency and contracts that then suck up all your available money. And then now you don't have quality depth. So yes, give him some credit for free agent picks, but mostly the GM's there for draft picks in which he failed.
And Pete, there absolutely is room for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah in the NFL. There was before this, during this, and after this. It just may not be as a general manager, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the areas that teams will want to talk more about him is just how they went about finding these undrafted rookie free agents, guys like Jalen Redmond and Levi Drake Rodriguez, Ivan Pace. I mean, you've got this team. I think has gotten more out of undrafted guys, or as much as anybody in the league in that regard. So I think that's an area over the last 4 years that has gone very well for this team. But and keep in mind too that you have, to Ben's point, everything, you have a GM for a reason. If you turn the keys over to a coach is going to win today. He's going to win now. He's not going to he's going to draft for this season. He's not going to draft for 2, 3, 4 years down the road, because coaches know they have to win now. You can't win. Winning in 2 or 3 years is not going to help them because they're probably not going to be around if they don't win now. And that's the role of a GM, is to balance that win now mentality with what's in the best long-term interest of this team. And that's the relationship, and that's the framework that all of this operates on. And for Kwesi, I think there are certain things that he can point to and say, this is what I was trying to do. This is how it went. This is the way I look at things, because I don't think analytics in that aspect or that way of looking at the NFL is dead. I think it's just going to have to evolve, especially in Minnesota.
And I would even add that I could see a role for him too that's not in scouting. And if his background was analytics and Wall Street and numbers and finance, then I don't know, maybe you lean into that a little bit more and you try to become the next Rob Brzezinski. And I think there's a lot of teams out there that would value highly somebody that understands the cap and the numbers and how to make all the financial pieces fit into the overall team puzzle. If he wants to sort of take some of his expertise and his background and what he's learned about NFL contracts through and doing all the numbers, like, I don't know, I could see a role too where he makes a long-term living with the team being their capologist versus trying to seems like he's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole with marrying the analytics and then also having to learn football. It's and Pete, you understand, it's like, it's not just like you watch film for a couple of years and you're like, oh, I'm a football expert. Like, no, you have to be in it for a long time just to feel it. And sometimes it's not even just what you see on film. It's just kind of like this overall, like, you're picking up expertise through osmosis, through talking to people, being at practice, watching guys move around, and you're making mental notes about how these guys play. That is not so much just like meat and potatoes, watch this guy on film and make my evaluation.
And Ben's going to leave in a couple of minutes, but before he says goodbye, likewise for you, Pete, the next general manager, whether it's Rob Brzezinski or whomever else, the moving forward plan, feel me out on this, or hear me out on this. With the contract they gave Kevin after last year, he has to have a big say in all of this. And I'm talking about the moving forward plan. And that's cool if so, because he cares, he's smart, and he's done terrific work winning games. Seasons there were challenges, and he and his family have embraced the state on all levels. And he probably had the most to do with Brian Flores returning too. So, yeah, I mean, if KO has KO power with some or all decisions, all good with me. I don't know that to be the case, but I wanted to state mine. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Pete, go ahead.
As coaches go, when it's in the and let me just say this in general. The coaches, as they are at a franchise, and the longer they're with a franchise, the more power they usually get. Why? Because they've been successful. That's the only reason why you stick around. You don't see coaches get proverbially neutered per se and saying, well, yeah, we used him he was doing the draft and personnel and everything. We're going to keep him as the head coach, but he's just not going to be responsible for X, Y, and Z and all these other. No, it doesn't go that way, right? You as a head coach win and you gain, incrementally more and more say in what goes on because you are winning and because you are doing the right things. So yeah, I see his role in the franchise from when he was a first time head coach, really first time play caller, and seeing the success that he's had over the last 4 seasons. Has he fallen short? Yeah, are we not where we want to be? Of course, but he's year after year after year, incrementally, I think, gaining more say. And again, Paul and Ben, we will never know exactly who's making what calls, when and where, and how that's all laid out. We can only speculate. But I expect Kevin to have a lot more say in what's going on in that building going forward.
Ben, you get the last word.
Yeah, this is what I'll say about all of this is that I think Rob is actually more qualified than people think. I think he'd be a fantastic leader in the scouting department, overseeing player development, all that stuff, scouting and building this team. The thing that I would caution, I'm trying to look at this through cautious eyes, is that if you're in this supposed new power structure, if that remains the same after the draft, where Rob Brzezinski's the GM, you rely a little heavier on your coordinators, which is your head coach on one side and Brian Flores on the other side. That's great because there's two football guys that are making decisions and are like heavily handed in the scouting. But that also down the road leads to an organizational divide. And that is something that you do not want in a team environment. You don't want offense versus defense. You don't want that feel. You don't want to have this push-pull where one is like angling towards, I really need this guy at pick 18 or whatever it is. What pick do we have, 18?
18.
I want this guy on the defensive side. I want this guy on the offensive side. And if you're empowering these two guys to carry that much weight, I'm not saying it happens this year, but I feel like it has the recipe for overtime dividing and creating a power struggle and a power vacuum within an organization. So I think that they need really, really hard defined roles, and not that they shouldn't have some input, because we all know that they have input now, but just making sure that you cap that power and just say, like, no, guys, it's me at the top that's making this decision. It's not an us versus them. We're not going to get into practice and it's going to be offense versus defense. We're going to win and lose games as a team. We're not going to have this divided locker room. So that is the one thing that I would say, like, man, I love where we're going to go in with this with Rob. This is the one thing that I would caution us on.
Ben, thank you for coming by. Pete, thanks a lot for calling in. Love you guys.
Love you. Thank you.
Right,
See you, Pete.
Love you too, man.
Yep, appreciate you. Pete Bercich, Ben Leber, the analysts for the KFAN Minnesota Vikings Audio Network. Kyle Rudolph, one of the great tight ends in the history of Minnesota Vikings football, joins us around the corner. KFAN Sports Talk time is 9:37. Kyle Rudolph.
Big boy's back.
One of the greatest tight ends in the history of Minnesota Vikings football. Nice enough to join us. Kyle, love you, buddy. And thanks for helping the show. And you live in or by Tampa Bay, I believe. Were you surprised in any way Baker publicly got after Stefanski the way he did?
You know how we are as athletes, when we're always looking for kind of like that chip on our shoulder, or we're always because like ultimately, like, we're all professionals in this industry. And, did I love going against Clay Matthews and Julius Peppers for 8 years in a row in the NFC North? No, but like, they're good guys and you have respect for them. And ultimately, like, when you step inside the lines, like, you have to like kind of create that edge, if you would. So, like, did things end well for Baker in Cleveland? No, absolutely not. But like, how much of that was Kevin's decision? How much of that was the GM's decision? So then ultimately, like, now here they are in the NFC South, and like, I know Baker very, very well. Obviously, I know Kevin extremely well, having played on his team and, in the same room as him for a number of years. And it's kind of one of those things, like, Baker loves to have that fiery chip on his shoulder mentality. And, if it truly did go down that way where Kevin didn't reach out to him at all after, he was traded and shipped off, as he said, it's a great way to kind of stir up a good old NFC South rivalry with the Bucs and the Falcons.
Kyle Rudolph, old school, best school, football music to the metaphorical ears.
Big boy's back.
Who, speaking of somebody you know very well, that would be Vikings Executive Vice President of Football Operations, Rob Brzezinski. And I know you know about Kwesi, and I know you know about the moving forward plan as of now, in that Briz, as we call him in the business, will be running the team at least through the draft. What if, because you know better than anybody, man, that you got a GM, and if the picks are good and the picks are bad, it's all going to come back to that name, even though there are multiple people who have say in what happens with drafts and or free agency. But just for the case of 2026, Kyle, I mean, what if the Vikings go like 8 for 8 in the draft? What if 18 is just a stone cold home run and everybody can see it in year number one. I know you got a lot of respect for Rob Brzezinski. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it was very well documented, my comments when I saw the news that Rob was kind of the person put in charge throughout the course of this offseason through free agency and the draft. And, you know, I couldn't be more excited for him. I think he deserves this opportunity. He's ready for this opportunity. For all of us that have been in the building over the course of the last 20 plus years, we all know that Rob's the architect behind the curtain. Like he's the guy making all of these deals happen. He's the one manipulating the cap better than anyone in the NFL. But I think one of the things people don't realize about Rob is he does understand football. Like, yeah, he's always been the numbers guy who's the one, you know, I think about like our run from 17, 18, 19, 20. We were number one in the NFL in cash in a couple of years, and you can't do that if you don't have a true wizard working the salary cap like Rob did. But again, I go back to one thing that people don't really understand is, you know, Rob, he understands ball, and if he doesn't understand it, he's going to ask. And I think if you have someone that's leading your team throughout the course of the offseason, there's really no better person to pair with a young offensive-minded head coach in Kevin, who is going to work hand in hand. You know, those look at the GM head coach combos that have been successful over the last decade plus are the ones where the head coach and the GM are in sync.
Yep.
And, you know, you don't think Rob's going to lean on Kevin in terms of personnel on the offensive side of the ball and lean on Brian Flores for personnel on the defensive side of the ball. It's really kind of this perfect three-headed monster between Rob Brzezinski, Kevin O'Connell, and Brian Flores for them to say, hey, look, we know going into this offseason, nobody's going to be able to create more cap space. Obviously, we're way underwater in the cap as it stands right now, but Rob's the best at it, so he'll figure it out. And then you attack it between those three people going out and saying, oh, these are the guys that we have to get in free agency. These are the draft picks. These are the type of people that we want to bring into this organization. And, you know, to me, I hope that after that whole process, you know, obviously the Wilfs will do their due diligence and they'll go out and look at other candidates. But I hope it's Rob's job to keep and he gets the opportunity moving forward.
Kyle, probably a dumb question here, but I just want to hear you answer it. You keep saying, we are this with the cap. We are this with Rob. We are this with Kevin. Now, you finished your career with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, also played with the New York Giants. Why is it important for you for Vikings references to forever, I guess, or certainly for now, be we?
Well, it will always be we. You know, ultimately, I wasn't like Harrison and played my entire career there. You know, if he ultimately decides to move on and be done, you know, he'd be a guy 14 years in one place. It's incredible. I would have loved to have had that opportunity. I didn't. So a brief stop in New York, and then I came down here and thawed out after 31 years in the Midwest and got some Florida sunshine. But let's be honest, I didn't do a whole lot in either one of those places. You know, certainly those organizations were great to me, but it will always be we in reference to the Minnesota Vikings. You know, it's a place that I've always said has the best fan base in the world. I loved seeing, going back to my buddy Harrison, his comments that he made after the Christmas game, the whiteout against Detroit. Just, it is a true testament to Minnesota Vikings fans. So, you know, for me, it will always be we. And the Wilfs know this. Rob knows this. Kevin knows this. If there's anything that I could ever do to help them, I'm always there, and I'm always willing to help, because there's no place that I want to see succeed more than that place. Ultimately, I had 10 years to try to bring the first championship to the state of Minnesota, and I couldn't get it done. That doesn't mean that if there's not ever an opportunity to do anything to help that place out, I wouldn't do it. So that's why it will always be we when I reference the Minnesota Vikings.
Who is the best overall tight end in the NFL right now, and why?
I still think, Trey McBride had statistically one of the greatest seasons ever by a tight end. Over, record number of catches, over 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns. And, he's certainly making a case at the top of tight ends in the NFL. But in my opinion, George Kittle has to still be dethroned as the most complete tight end, in my opinion. He's playing in an offense under Kyle Shanahan that is the Kubiak-Shanahan offense that we were familiar with at the end of my career in Minnesota. And so I kind of understand what's asked of him in the run game and in pass protection. And when I watch him play, nobody does what he does in the run game, in pass pro, and then goes out and puts up Pro Bowl level numbers when healthy in the pass game. So for me, it's still George Kittle at the top of all tight ends.
Kyle Rudolph.
Big boy's back.
Few to close here. All right. Well, with the Super Bowl then, who's the best overall tight end in the Super Bowl? I would think it would either be A.J. Barner or Hunter Henry. Maybe you have another. But between those two, what do you like about him and why?
Well, I think Hunter Henry is a guy who you look at the course of his career, it kind of flies under the radar in Los Angeles, being on the Chargers as they had just moved from San Diego up to L.A. He played in an offense where he's got Phillip Rivers back there slinging the ball around. They're throwing it all over the place. He's putting up big numbers, but they never really had the team success to really amplify and shine a light on his individual success. Then he goes to New England and signs the big free agent deal in New England right as they were going through their full rebuild post Tom Brady into this, transition of Cam Newton, Mac Jones. Then all of a sudden Drake May comes onto the scene, and now you have, an MVP candidate, one of the best young quarterbacks. And, I think you're really seeing just the steadiness of Hunter Henry. He's a team captain. He's a leader in that locker room. So, I would definitely have to go with Hunter Henry in the game in terms of my number one tight end in the game.
Think about this regarding tight ends. Of course, you want big-time edge guys. I mean, shoot, they have Grenard and Van Ginkel here. And when they're both healthy, hide the women and children. I mean, they're fantastic. So good guys off the edge, shut down corners, dynamite 3 technique defensive tackles, left tackles. There are a lot of things that go in, and quarterback too, go into winning at a high level. I understand that. But think about this. It like the LA Rams, the Seattle Seahawks, and now the New England Patriots and the Philadelphia Eagles, the champions from last year. If you have good tight ends and can run, you're going to be tough to stop. And both these teams personify that, right?
Yeah, I think that style of football just makes it so hard on a defensive play caller. It makes it really hard to figure out the personnel you're going to put on the field, how you're going to match up. If you have tight ends who can go out in the pass game and take advantage of coverage against linebackers or coverage against smaller DBs, but can also hold up in the run game and block those edge guys that you were talking about that really, wreak havoc throughout the course of a game. It makes it very hard for a defensive coach to be able to trot out big personnel to stop the run, because then you could throw the ball all over him, or, putting a extra DB on the field to match up with a pass catching tight end. Now we can run the ball at will against that light front. So, I think you've seen it over, the course of how many years. If you have a couple tight ends that can go on the field, to me, it shocked me watching the Rams this year. Obviously, I know they're not playing in the game. They came up short, lost to Seattle, but, Sean McVay was a guy that was 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, his whole career as a play caller, and watching them run 3 tight ends out on the field and being able to do all the same concepts that he traditionally does with receivers in the pass game, then line up with big people and run the football. It makes it really, really hard. Speaking of Kevin Stefanski, he used to say all the time, like, the call sheet that the defensive coach has, or the section of the call sheet that the defensive coach has for 3 tight end personnel is usually like the smallest section on his call sheet. So if we can have a lot of stuff out of that personnel, they're going to be very basic, and it's going to be to our advantage.
It's age old. I mean, if you can make 3 tight ends and a running game work, you're going to be difficult to stop. I mean, look at the team that just won the NFC North. I mean, the Bears, they're running it with Monangai and DeAndre Swift, but they're also making it work with Loveland, Kmet, and then your guy who used to be with the Dolphins, Durham Smythe. I mean, he caught a
couple dummers in there.
Right. He caught the first touchdown of his career this year, but Durham Smythe, most people are like, never heard of him, couldn't care less. He was very important to what they did.
Yeah, it just makes you really, as an offense, like people think, oh, well, a dynamic offense is an offense that has 3-4 receivers. We throw the ball all over the field. But, really when you think about it, like, I think we would all call that offense dynamic because now you have so many different playmakers in terms of tight ends catching the football, running backs catching the football, and of course you're always going to have your number one receiver out there on the field with explosive play ability. But it's a ton of fun. I think I need to get back in shape, and that way we can go out there with 3 and 4 tight ends next year in purple. What do you think?
100%. I mean, it's there were a few games this year where Kevin had 4 tight ends active, and I'm like, the Bigfoot sighting. The 41 personnel. Holy cow, is that coming? I mean, take it a step farther than those 3 tight ends. Hey, you're fantastic, man. Thank you very much for coming through for 9 to noon today. Let's stay in touch, all right?
Always, PA. Love being on with you guys. Tell everybody we said hi in the studio.
You just did, brother. Thank you, Kyle Rudolph. Love you, man. That was fantastic. All right, to the world of hockey around the corner.
Let's play hockey!
KFAN Sports Talk time, 9:59.